back to the Writing Happy Hour, episode 5. I cannot believe we are 5 episodes into this thing. Uh, it's been a crazy month, both in here and outside. I hope you guys are staying safe and keeping calm in these crazy times. Hopefully, you can come hang out and take your mind off of things for a little while here and just kick back and listen in. Um, I got Reese Ramirez with me today. You guys, he is a published author. Let me pull up your stuff real quick. I feel horrible, but
No, that's okay.
um,
Yeah, public is kind of a big word there, but I
well,
appreciate it.
look, hey man, you got your stuff in a book, and one of the things that so like my buddy Charlie, who used to do publishing and stuff, like you get into a book, you're published, dude. So
Yeah,
um,
I mean, yeah.
uh, go ahead and let people know where they can find you and what stuff you've been working on and what you got out there right now.
So right now, I'm posting I just, yeah, a couple days ago, posted the first episode of a web series that I'm working on to a website called Niavolo, and another one called Royal Road. Both of them are kind of cool um, websites where people post their web series or just books they write, and they're kind of looking for somewhere to put out their work. Kind of similar idea to Wattpad. Doesn't really have the same reputation. I may go and post on Wattpad too, but I just like trying to work out these other websites right now. Neovolo is a really cool one because they actually will support the authors who post on their website through unique reads by premium members or people who are seeing ads. It's a pretty small amount, but it's like 25 to 50% of revenue that they make off that sort of stuff on the unique reads. Um, so that's pretty cool. They got an awesome system set up there, but they're not exclusive, so I can post wherever I want to aside from
That's awesome.
them. But yeah, so it's kind of that series in particular I'm kind of describing as this semi absurdist, like sci-fi superhero time travel sort of mishmash. It was kind of a passion project from a long time ago, and I'm just kind of having fun with it. Since I'm putting it up for free, I don't have to have like any sort of industry like standard or whatever that I'm meeting with it. I can just do whatever I want.
Right.
But really, I'm focused on I'm writing some middle grade books. I just finished the first draft of my first middle grade book at the beginning of December, and I'm working on the second draft right now. It always helps me to have something that I'm writing while I'm editing because I'll get all this creative energy and I want to put it out somewhere. So I have something kind of focused that I do on the side that's not as important.
Right.
And it's kind of my web series project right now.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's always good to have that kind of outlet for when you're writing, to where you can get where when you inspiration does strike and you don't really have, like, it's coming from somewhere else and it doesn't pertain to like your main focus. It's good to have somewhere to go to put that inspiration out, to keep it going and to get your brain flowing and everything.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
It's kind of it'll help me get like inspiration for when I like when I'm trying right now. I'm trying to fix developmental issues in the story, so I'm trying to make sure that the story overall is good. I'm not really worrying about like grammar and line editing stuff. Um, I'm just reworking the overall story structure, which fortunately I did like three drafts before, well, like three outline drafts before this that were very detailed. So I don't have a whole lot to fix in the story, but there's still a few things once you put it down on the page that you kind of still have to work with it a little bit because it'll play out a little bit differently to how you outlined it. So that's kind of what this draft is about, and then I'll work on some grammar stuff.
yeah, I tend to do that too. Going through several drafts before I even think about saying, okay, I think it might be good enough now. I pick
Yeah,
apart everything, and it gets kind of ridiculous sometimes, but it definitely helps keep everything flowing nice and easy. Um, so what kind of got you into writing? Like, how did you get your start writing and everything?
Yeah, so I actually attribute a lot of this to my parents. They were super supportive of. I just realized I'm kind of out of frame
Oh no,
there.
you're good.
They were always super supportive of me being an author. Um, like when I was 5 or 6 years old, I think officially I call it at six because I really don't. I like who remembers that far back.
Right, right.
But I wanted to record one of my dreams that I had. It was one of the most vivid dreams that I'd had up until that point. It was about like an alternate version of Thomas the Tank Engine, which was like my favorite source of fiction back at the day. Um, and so
Nice.
I was like super excited, and but like I didn't really know that much English. I was, a very small child. So what my parents did was they folded some like sheet paper in half and just stapled it together like a book binding, and then they just gave me a bunch of crayons and let me just kind of draw it all out. And it was really fun, and I started doing that pretty much every day. Uh, it's a good thing that paper is not that expensive because I blew through just probably stacks or bundles or whatever of paper throughout my childhood, just doing this all the time. And yeah, so that's how I started, and I just never stopped telling stories. I just always kept on improving on what I did. Obviously, my crayon comics aren't at the par of what I'm setting for myself right
Hey, we
now.
all
But
got to start somewhere, man.
yeah, definitely. The first full book I wrote, and I sent you that song where I kind of described these sorts of things
Right.
because I do songs sometimes. I actually chose writing over music back in college because I couldn't have both hobbies going on with how busy I was.
I'm same boat,
And
man.
I kind of had to make a decision. Yeah. So it's just writing was just like always with me, and music kind of was too, but music still is, just not in the creative way, more in the I like to listen to music a lot.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, I wrote this book about kids who do experiments in their dad's home lab and end up imbuing themselves with the powers of different types of pizza. Um, so and then they go on this like time heist to stop this guy from blowing up the world, like your typical mad scientist, mustache twirling sort of villain type. It was insane, and honestly, I can't believe my dad sat and read through the entire thing. It was like 50 pages long,
Dude,
and the only comment that I remember from him was that he said that he really liked my dialogue because he thought it felt natural.
that's
And
that's amazing, man,
yeah,
because it's so good
I
to
would,
have parents that are willing
yeah,
to help with that and to be invested in that. And as sad as it is, it's hard for some parents or to find writers who could have been great if they had started at a younger age, if their parents were involved in helping them write and everything. And I don't have kids yet, but when I do have kids, that's something that I'm going to strive for. The arts I will push heavy, and if they are interested in it, I'm going to be right there helping them, because
yeah,
you
definitely.
can't stifle that creativity. And it's good that you had parents in your life that were there to help do that for you.
Yeah. Um, yeah, something that I've seen a few people on Reddit like post they posted about their kid or their niece or their nephew or something writing something, and they were like, "Hey, they seem like they really have a passion for this." But like I don't really care about books. I just care about this kid, so I want to find a way to support them. And so advice that I always give is stuff like and it's just pulled from my own experience, but like kids will meet all sorts of negative feedback when they get into the world.
Yep.
Like every adult knows this. Everybody, like, there's always somebody around a corner waiting to give you negative feedback about something. So the one place that they don't really need to hear negative feedback about something creative is in their home. That can be a safe place where they can continue to grow, and they will challenge themselves. They don't need to be challenged by somebody else. If it's something that they're really passionate about, they're going to continue trying to grow because that's what kids do. I think that sometimes and one reason that I love the idea of writing middle grade is because middle graders are so like hungry for growth and knowledge and expanding their worldview because that's the stage of development that you're at. So for these kids, it's really important that they have somebody who just gives them the positive feedback because they
Right.
will receive the negative feedback. Whatever you're thinking, somebody will tell that to them.
Yeah.
Like that's a guaranteed fact. And they will tell them a lot more and they will tell them bad things. And it's good to be able to maybe like address that after it's happened, or prepare them for that type of feedback in a very constructive way, but really the most important thing is just that positive feedback always being.
Yep. Yep. That's it's 100% true, and it's a terrible thing to have a negative environment when it comes to creativity in a house because it stifles a lot of growth. I remember in eighth grade, my English teacher. This was actually the first time I ever really sat down and like wrote out a narrative story. One of our projects was to take whatever writing assignment we have had throughout the year, our favorite one, expand on it, and she got it printed and bound and gave it out to everybody, and that was your final project, and you got to keep the book that you wrote. And it was some crazy story about these kids going into a hospital and having to fight a demon and stuff like that. And yeah, it was eighth grade me had a lot of issues.
No, that's great. Yeah, that sounds like a great outlet for you.
Yeah, it was really cool. And then, in high school and everything, I started kind of gearing myself more towards music. I actually was with my uncle and he taught me how to play bass, and then I kind of just expanded on that, and then all my creativity went to music. And I was lucky enough that my parents were very supportive about the music stuff, so my creativity was able to grow in that way. But once I got out and I started reading comics and everything, that's when I kind of was like, you know what, maybe I want to gear myself more towards writing because I do like playing music and I like, listening to music, but I cannot write a song to save my damn life. Like musically, I can't write a song. Like I can read chords, I can read, music theory all day long, but when I sit down to go, okay, well, let's see what this chord transitions to this chord, my brain just blanks, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
but yeah, any creativity outlet like that and having parents that support you definitely help. Um, So, what kind of inspirations do you have in your writing? Like, what kind of inspires you when you write and you pull from?
A lot of things, honestly. So one thing specifically with my middle grade book, I had decided that I wanted to write a middle grade book. Uh, and I was like, I had all these stories in my head at one point, probably upwards of 40 stories that were all set in the same universe. At this point, I've kind of scrapped that. Stargazer, the story that I'm posting on Neobolo and Royal Road, is kind of a recycling of one of those ideas that I was a bigger fan of, that I can still do without needing to do some of these other things. Um, but so with my middle grade story, I'm just sitting there like normally I have like all this inspiration in my head and I don't know what to do. And so I just thought about like start big, like what is something that inspired me when I was a kid and something that I always loved. In one of the dreams that I remember from back when I was younger than 10, I know I was younger than 10, I don't know how old I was, but I had a dream of Cloud City uh, from Star Wars, on the planet Bespin,
Right.
and I always thought that city was so cool. And I was like, okay, cool. Just like come up with a reason that there's a city in a sky somewhere, and like we'll figure it out. Like, and then it kind of turned into this diesel punk aspect because in order to stay in the sky, you have to be constantly burning fuel
Right.
to keep yourself kind of in orbit. So I'm like, okay, so fuel is like the most valuable resource in this world. And I just kind of like started going through, and then I got down to like, what would a kid's problem be in this universe? Like a common kid problem. And then I was like, what kind of mystery could they solve? Because kids' mystery books are really popular because it allows kids to work through these problems and kind of discover whether or not they figured out the answer at the end. And they get that kind of gratification when they do figure it out, or they just are amazed when they didn't figure it out and it's a total plot twist. it's kind of a win-win either way.
Right.
Uh, and so I went with that direction. So I just kind of like tried to inspire myself with what I have been inspired by. And so sometimes that's going to be some nerdy thing that I've always loved, like Star Wars or Marvel or whatever. And sometimes it's just going to be some bizarre idea that like popped into my head during a dream. Sometimes my wife will tell me something like from a dream that's just, like it is so weird to me because, dreams are just weird. And when it's your own dream, it kind of makes sense. But when it's somebody else's dream, you're just like, where did that come from?
Right.
And so I can like kind of find inspiration in that and like try to work back like the mental path that might have taken to get there and maybe even like put it in a realistic world setting and just see what happens. And so I do these little story exercises in my head all the time. And I think that kind of keeps the inspiration going.
That's awesome. Yeah, I get that way. You get that right before you go to bed, and your mind just kind of is like, hey, maybe you don't want to go to sleep yet. Why don't you think about this? And then your fucking ideas start coming in, and you're just like, oh, not now. Wait till like 12 o'clock tomorrow, please. And then
Yeah.
you just gotta. Well, I tend to. I keep a little notepad with me next to the bed, and I'll write it down real quick. And
Yeah.
like sometimes you're like, oh yeah, that's really cool. That's an awesome idea. And other times you're like, what? What was I smoking last night? What happened here? you know,
Yeah,
um,
that's honestly a lot of where it started was not like obviously I told you where it started, but like a lot of the continuation was like I would stay awake at night for roughly 2 hours almost every night. I really didn't start going to bed well until a year after I got married. Um, and before that I was just up like I would have to go to bed an hour before I really needed to go to bed at least because I knew that I was going to be up for that next hour. And most of the time it was like listening to music and using that music to create certain scenarios in my head, like almost like it's the background music in
right.
a movie that's playing out in my head. And I would kind of use that to get myself hyped for things that I was going to write. And I honestly still do that. Like if I
Yeah.
have time before bed, I'll get in bed early and like put in a headphone and listen to music for a little bit and try to get hyped. Um, yeah,
What kind of music do you listen to when you're trying to come up with ideas and stuff like that?
lots of different types of music. Um, One thing that I listen to when I'm writing Stargazer, a lot of it is actually synthwave music. Um,
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Fuck
Like
yeah.
that kind of 80s, like synthwave outrun vibe. I listen to a lot of that because I'm going for that kind of retro futuristic feel with some of the weird like technology that really wouldn't work, but like at one point we thought it would work.
Right.
It really like that
Right.
that imagination of the past where the world was so big and we looked at things as like all these possibilities. Uh, and imagine the technology in all these ways that don't really work in real life, but like it's really cool to think that they would work.
Right.
So I kind of draw inspiration from that because I kind of like the disconnect from reality and still being able to address reality. But so that kind of appeals to me. Sometimes I listen to like indie music, like just indie folk music if I'm just like sitting down to grind out some words and I don't like I already know what I'm gonna write and I don't really need to feel the inspiration from it. I just need something kind of soothing to listen to.
Right.
Sometimes it's like rock music or orchestral music, uh, stuff like that. I really am pretty flexible with the types of music that I listen to. Sometimes I try to tailor it to the character
Yep.
that I'm writing. So I'll try because putting myself in different moods when I'm writing different characters helps me distinguish their voices apart so that it feels like different people are the perspective of the story and it's not just all the same guy telling different people's stories. Because I really like that third person close, like very close to the characters sort of writing.
Yeah. I tend to do that too. When I'm writing my characters for the comic book. Um, yeah, I synthwave, Darthwave, all that kind of stuff I'll use. I'll do a little vaporwave every now and then when I want to keep things calm. Like when I'm trying to write a calmer scene, I'll throw on some vaporwave to have in the background. Um, but yeah, I definitely that kind of music just it's a different zone it gets you into than like listening to movie scores or something like that, because it really brings you into it's like fantasy but for modern times is the way I see it. It gets you into this like fantasy world zone but like today, you know.
Yeah,
And that's kind of why what I use there. And I'll listen to when I'm writing one of my characters, the main guy. He's kind of a down to earth firefighter type of guy. I listen to a lot of like not necessarily like modern country, but back burner country right now, like Sturgill Simpson, Tyler Childress, stuff like that. And I keep them on to kind of help me get into his mood a little bit.
yeah,
But I definitely find using that helps you really feel out what a character or like what a scene's supposed to feel. Like the other day I was driving down the road and I was listening to freaking Rasputin by Boney M. And in my head I'm like, I'm gonna fucking use this as a soundtrack for him to go in and have a fucking fight scene in a Russian nightclub and fight Russian mobsters. Because it's just that it fits. It just fits.
yeah. That's great.
um
Whatever authors can do to create that inspiration is just, important. Like, it doesn't have to be music. I've heard some people use like essential oils.
Yeah.
I don't have that deep a connection with essential
Mhm.
oils, but if you do, if that helps you create like an emotion in yourself, that's awesome. Some people just have different lightings. Uh, some people will just like, and actually I do this a little bit because I learned this from other people and I find it very helpful, choosing like word choice patterns for different people and writing according to these different word choice patterns. Like, for example, in Stargazer I have a character who's very, very intelligent in like a book smart sort of way, but not very socially intelligent.
Right.
And so he thinks in kind of these bigger words. And then I have some characters who are more socially and emotionally intelligent, or they care about different things, and the words that they choose are more geared towards the things that they care about and they think about. And I think I execute that well. We always think that about our own work.
Right.
But I do try to do that sort of stuff just to like distinguish these different moods from different people and help you feel like it's a person that is not me. And really, all of these people are people who are kind of a part of me. Like, they all represent different parts of myself. Uh, and what I try to do to pull from other people's experiences as well. But really, the closest experience you can get is your own.
Right.
And we all have those feelings. So that's why I think music helps guys like you and me, because somebody will be singing about a song and they're expressing a feeling that we've definitely had before, but we're not really feeling it right now, but we can put ourselves in that mood because this guy is like really, or this girl or whoever is really singing their heart out about this song.
Right.
And it kind of puts you in that mood.
And it doesn't even have to be like experiences that you've had in your life, because I'll listen to Nose to the Grindstone by Tyler Childress, and he's talking about popping pills and cocaine and stuff like that, and how it's taken a toll on his life. And I'm like, I mean, I've never done it, but boy, can I feel your pain in this song, and it really
Yeah,
gets you in that mood, in that mindset, you know.
yeah, there's kind of a mirror reaction that happens there.
Right, and you can and again, that's kind of what I use to put myself into a character's mind, because I would think, what kind of life experiences would this character have? What would he have done in his life that's led him to this point? And well, what song would kind of help me strike that emotion? And with my main character, PTSD and addiction is a very prevalent issue in firefighters, veteran firefighters, and everything. A lot of guys I've seen a lot of guys get hooked on painkillers. I've seen a lot of guys get, hooked on different drugs, or, they suffer through PTSD and depression and just kind of don't talk about it, and they just keep it inside. And I find that outlaw country, that old style outlaw country pulls a lot from that, because a lot of those guys did that same kind of stuff. They had a lot of pain and hurt in their heart, and they covered it up with drugs and booze. And It really helps get you into that mindset, even though you've never been there, like at that level. Because I have depression. I've suffered through depression, but not at that level. Like never turning towards a substance to kind of help you feel better. I also find that meditating helps a lot too.
Yeah.
I've that's something new that I've picked up that's really helped my writing is meditating, and just kind of tuning yourself to the energy around you, kind of thing, which definitely helps. And again, it's you can use your energy and put it into your words, and people will feel that because you know that you're passionate about it, so you're giving it your energy.
Yeah, we got to be the artist to other people that we like to utilize for our own inspiration.
Right, right. So have you had a mentor at all? Like I know you said that your parents were there helping you through it, but have you had like a mentor that's kind of helped kind of like teach you the ropes or kind of guide you through everything, or you kind of did it on your own?
Well, I kind of grew up in that era where YouTube wasn't really a huge. I mean, I'm not that old. I'm 25, so I'm not like
27.
back in my
Yeah.
but like, growing up, like YouTube was there, but it wasn't huge, and there definitely wasn't like an author tube community, and I honestly didn't even know that I could go to the web and just search like writing advice. I would have if I did. I just like didn't care. I spent most of my childhood playing outside.
Right.
Um, and so I spent like I never like I played some video games inside, but I was always just kind of the kind of guy that likes to be out and doing stuff. So I never really spent that much time trying to look through the internet to find things. So I didn't really find other writers honestly until probably like the end of high school when I started using this website called debate.org. And there was it that was an interesting website. But there was a pretty large community of people there who, aside from enjoying debating about different political subjects, they liked to write. Um, and so we actually had like these competitions where we'd all like write short stories and stuff. I wouldn't have said any of them were mentors, but being able to talk to other writers at least helped me out a lot. A lot of them gave me some useful advice because we all kind of have experiences that we're able to share with each other
Right.
and contribute to each other. Um, and right now, I'm in a really good writing group. Uh, the people that I'm hanging out with are at a level a little bit above me in terms of where they're at. Uh, a few of my best friends in there are published. One of them is a he edits for a an agent to kind of screen books or make suggestions. So he's always like super helpful with like some of the minute details. And there's some people that are better with some of the emotional aspects. There's just kind of like this wide variety of skills so that we're all kind of mentors toward each other, that we can help each other out with our own individual perspectives on things. Uh, so yeah,
Right. And
that's
that
that's kind of
it's
how it is.
and I've said it I think almost every episode now, but it's good to have a community of people around you to help. It's I always will advocate, get on Twitter, talk to people, meet people, learn from people. If you can, get in a Discord and talk to people in a Discord, or get on a Reddit subreddit and put your stuff out there and talk to people, because you'll find a lot of writers are more willing to help than they are to not. I mean, of course, you've got the masses of, oh, I'm a writer, and they post their stuff here, critique it, and then just leave it and don't say anything. you know
Yeah,
but the ones that
I see
are,
that you're on the writing subreddits as well.
yeah buddy, yeah buddy,
That happens a lot.
they just throw their stuff, and it's like, I want to know what you think of this. Okay, well, you're gonna have to give back to the community and talk to people about this stuff. And finding that now in my, when I'm getting heavy into it in my adult life, is great. In high school and a little bit, into college, Charlie was one of my best friends growing up. And our other friend Jordan, we had like a little trio friend circle thing going on, and we all we're creative types. Jordan, Charlie, and I all played music. We all wrote. We all did drawing and Photoshop and stuff like that. And we kind of created a little, almost how like Paul and John would compete with each other with their songwriting and try and one up each other. Every time they wrote a song, we would kind of do that to each other when we would write or do something. At least Charlie and I. I think Jordan was just there to have fun and be along for the ride, but Charlie and I definitely, whether we realized it or not, because I've noticed, and I don't know, he's in the chat. I don't know if he notices it or not, but whenever one of us picks up something again, the other one tends to go towards it as well and start getting back into it. And we start kind of, trying to compare and be like, oh, what'd you think of this? Oh, what'd you think of that? Oh, what about this? So it's good to have people to kind of push you and make you grow better and grow more as a writer and try and have that friendly competition, not like you're an asshole to them, but you
Yeah.
always want to strive to be the best, and it's good to have peers that are equal if not better than you to push to reach those heights.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the best mentor you can have. And Yeah, Charlie's right. Biggest piece of advice is to never take advice from someone who isn't in a place where you want to be. Um, so, to kind of transition into, themes. What kind of themes do you use in your writing? Like, what do you like to use theme wise?
Um, it kind of varies, depending on the type of story that I'm trying to tell. Um, you can get into some really complex themes, even in middle grade. Like, kids aren't dumb. Like they are, but like they're not.
Right. No.
Like
Yeah.
everybody. Like we all have kind of like we all have to grow and learn, and there's a lot of information that kids don't have, but there's also this really deep desire to seek information, and to seek perspective, kind of like I mentioned at the beginning. And it's really beyond what a lot of adults are at. Like a lot of adults just kind of stop seeking new perspective. You find your echo chamber, you sit there, and that's just where you exist for the rest of your life. And there's something really profound about kids who are growing up and they really just want to learn more about the world that they're in because their world is expanding. Um, and so I try not to hide more adult themes that I have. Like, obviously, there's some adult themes that are not really appropriate
Right.
for kids that I
Right.
don't put in books.
Right.
Um, but I try not to hide certain things. Like, I just kind of accidentally wrote like themes of classism into my book. Um, and it wasn't really intentional, but it's just part of the world that we have different social and economic classes that affect the way that people live, and that affects the way that kids live as well. And so it's not something that they are hidden from in the real world, so it may as well be something that's in one of their books.
Right.
uh, and so i I would say that more central themes are more moral, that I like to make them. I like to address certain moral issues. I would say that Sky City, which is the middle grade book that I'm in the second draft of, I would say that one of the central themes of that is forgiveness, being able to offer forgiveness and apologize, things like that, because that's something that was really important to me, and honestly, something that I don't really see in adults in kind of
Yeah.
the modern culture that we're in.
Yep.
Is the ability to have that sort of communication with each other and be forgiving of each other, and I think that's super important. But I also try to write books in a way that like you can pull your own meaning from it. So I kind of I have this dual perspective where I believe that an author's individual vision is beautiful and what they're trying to create. And part of that kind of goes back to what you were talking about with somebody just leaving a post on Reddit and being like, critique this. And it's like, well, what are you going for? Because I, if you ask me to give my feedback, I'm going to try to turn this into the type of story that I'm trying to write. That may not be the type of story that you're trying to write. And so you have to give me this lens through which to view it so that I can help you achieve the type of story that you're trying to write. And that's why I don't really respond to those posts, because I don't think that my voice is going to be of any help.
Right.
Um, So I have that perspective, and then I also have this death of the author perspective where I'm like, pull your own meaning. Like the author really doesn't matter. Like they've written a story, and that story is great. Uh, but if you read it and you're reading through this world that feels very real to you, and the characters feel real, they go through something that connects with you, and it's not even something that the author was consciously aware of that they put in their book. That's the meaning. Like extrapolate.
Right.
That's great. So there's kind of that dual perspective where there's a lot of intentionality behind it, but if you find something else in it, that's also beautiful. All of that is good.
For sure. And I have my faults with her because she's not a very good person. But even some of the bigger books that some of the being one of the bigger books out there, Harry Potter. I mean, J.K.
Oh
Rowling
yeah,
touched on straight up racism in Chamber of Secrets.
yeah,
And that's a kid's book, and it's something that you don't need to shy away from because um that's one of the faults of older writing with these kids books is that they tend to not talk about that kind of stuff. And I think now's the time where we need to be having that conversation. And you're right,
yeah,
kids are a lot smarter than they let on. And you got to give them
yeah.
credit for what they know. Um
Uh, yeah, no, and that also goes back to the important conversation of death of the author as well, because there was a lot of people who were very hurt by J.K. Rowling and
yep.
the sorts of things that she said online. Um, and they have Harry Potter tattoos, and they're like, "What do I do about these?" She like she hurt me, like the
Yeah.
things that she said, and like it's okay. Like obviously, everybody's individual feelings about it is going to be their own, and that's just what it's going to be. But it's also okay to still take meaning from the books, even if the author is somebody who has distanced themselves from you in that sort of way. So
Yep.
there's that
I had mentioned
intensity, and then
that
there's just the
last
author.
week with H.P. Lovecraft. I love all of his
Yeah,
books, but that guy was a raging racist and a horrible, horrible person. But you
yeah,
kind of have to,
it's not a good.
yeah, you got to separate the art from the artist sometimes when it comes to that kind of stuff. I, Michael Jackson, I love his music, but I
Yeah,
not as a person, not as a person. Another one that Charlie had mentioned: Hunger Games, totalitarianism, and big government. You know, another hard hitting thing that kids are smart enough to know about now. You know, kids have
right.
always been smart enough to know about that kind of stuff. Um,
Yeah, we just got to respect. I mean, if you want the younger generation to replace, like, the younger generation can't just constantly receive advice from the people who are older than them because eventually those people are gonna like it. I don't like to think about that because I love my grandparents, but like nobody lives forever. You have to help people who are in the generation below you in whatever way you can, but also respect that they're going to grow up to become independent people that
yep,
do not need to hear your opinion all the time. Like you can provide them with tools, with concepts that are like big adult concepts, and then just allow them to grow that as they learn in the world and they can filter perspectives through things. uh, and so you just kind of treat them like adults. But honestly, I don't even treat them like adults because with adults, I feel like you have to tread a little bit more carefully because people have these fully formed opinions,
right,
and somebody's always going to disagree with you. So I guess don't be careful because somebody's always going to disagree with you.
right.
But like you can write differently for kids because they want that, and then an adult might be looking to get offended in something that you write. Some people go looking for that. I don't know why, but it happens.
Yeah, it does, and it's sad. And you know, again, the times we live in these polarizing times, it's almost easier to write for kids than it would be to write for adults because
Yeah,
you're always gonna alienate half of an audience no matter what you do. It seems like unless you're writing bland nothing manual reports. It's just kind of you gotta tread so lightly that it's just like, you know what, screw it. I'm gonna write what I want to write. You like it, you like it. You don't, okay, whatever, man. You know,
Yeah,
it is what it is.
I think yeah, I think my approach is always just to be as human as possible. There's a movie that I don't know if you can tell by my last name, but I'm a little bit Hispanic. My dad is from Panama.
Okay.
So there was this movie that came out a few years ago called Coco,
Yes.
and was a it's just an interesting movie because it came out at a time that there was such high political tension in regards to people from Mexico. Um, and it's just kind of like the things that people are saying to each other online is just crazy, and the things that people believe is just crazy, um, and you can take that however you will.
Right. Right.
But then this movie comes out about Mexico, specifically set in Mexico, and with a lot of things in it that you really don't get unless you're Mexican. Like there's a lot of jokes. There's actually kind of an adultish joke where Hector dies of choking on Teresa, which is funny if you're Mexican.
Oh,
um,
that hit me. Oh no.
uh, like because like you tell an American that they might get it, but like if you're Mexican, like you immediately go, oh yeah, that's that's
Okay.
funny. And so there's these things that are specifically sewn in there that are not for American audiences. But the movie does not attempt to make any sort of statement necessarily. It just humanizes people, which it's almost like it's really silly to think that you would have to humanize humans.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't, it's weird, but when it comes to that, it comes to that. And then, there's nothing that you can do other than do that. And that's particularly effective. Um, and so it just is this really human story set in a fantastical world, which is my favorite type of story. Just bonkers, nothing is real. Like this could never happen in real life, but it's so human at its core, and it makes me cry every time I watch it, because of how beautiful that is. And that's just the type of story that I set out to write, the kind that provides this representation, doesn't necessarily make a ton of political statements. There's always going to be a political aspect to anything that
Yeah.
I write.
Yeah.
It's just because I'm a person who pays attention to politics sometimes,
Yep.
but more so to just make these things connect with people who maybe wouldn't agree with the perspective that I have, but create that emotional connection so that I can help people out of that echo chamber. Because I think that's the biggest issue, honestly. I keep bringing it up because it's just so important to see perspectives that are outside your own. You don't have to agree with anybody on anything that you don't agree with them about. But just to at least understand that there's other humans with unique experiences that are just as valid as your
Yep.
own is something that's really important to us growing, especially right now as a really polarized culture. So that's the kind of thing that I set out to do.
And and I can attest to that because growing up, and Charlie can attest to it too, being from the same area. We lived in this small backwater Mississippi town, and I grew up full on Catholic, went to church every Saturday, was doing catechism on Wednesdays, and going all these different church retreats and stuff like that, and doing youth band. And I was heavy into the politics of the region at the time. And then I was just living with my parents, and the only thing I knew was what was around me in this little area. And then I moved on to Hattiesburg, Mississippi, which is a college town, and it's got a lot more progressive viewpoints on a lot of things, and it blows your mind when you finally step out of that echo chamber and you get into a bigger world, and you start thinking about, well, shit, that's a pretty good viewpoint. I never really thought about it like that, or nobody's ever really told me that that's a way to look at that. And helping people to realize that is definitely. Oh, Charlie, yeah, you're from the north, my ass. You spent most of your life in Mississippi. You were in the echo chamber with me, and don't even lie. But that's kind of what I want to set up to do as well with my comic book, is to kind of help people realize, that there's some things that that you don't really think about that you need to think about to kind of help bring you out
Yeah.
of your rut and bring you out of that life that you're stuck in, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
I um I saw this really interesting perspective on Reddit from somebody from Germany who was talking about German patriotism and how patriotism to them in a different country looks more like cleaning up trash on a sidewalk. Um, and that was pretty much all they said. But it got me, it got the ball rolling. And I'm like, okay, so that's just, like that's something that we don't really think of in America, is it? Like keeping the area around you clean, respecting the earth that you walk on, the land that you live in, um, respecting the people around you. It kind of extends to that as well. And patriotism can be this idea that's way beyond this small, like, it's just like patriotism is when my perspective is the dominant perspective in this country. Patriotism is when everybody in my country is lifted up.
yep,
The people around me are honored because of the life that I live, um, and I am taking care of my community. And then suddenly I was like, that's patriotism. Like that, nobody will ever convince me that that's not patriotism or that patriotism is something else. Like to me, that's patriotism, um, and it's not nationalism. It's just loving the people who are in my vicinity because that's the type of people that I can have the greatest impact
yep,
on.
yep. Um,
Unless I get popular with my books, then I can have an impact on lots of
yep,
people. That would be great.
yep. That's where we all want to go someday. I hope we can get there.
Yeah.
Um, so who were some of your favorite writers growing up? And when I say writers, it doesn't necessarily mean authors. It could be comic books. It could be songwriters. It could be whoever.
Okay, so songwriters. I always loved this band called Reliant K. I grew up Christian, so I listened to a lot of Christian
Yep.
music growing up. I'm still Christian. I have a slightly different, uh, I've adjusted how that applies to my life as I've grown up, but I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
Uh, and So Reliant K is kind of a Christian band. They are Christians and they do a lot of like they have done a lot of Christian music, but they also just do like silly punk songs like 90s punk
Yep.
and stuff like
We used to listen to them all the
that.
time.
Oh, okay, yeah, you're
Oh
aware.
yeah,
Then
yeah.
they're really fun. I listened to actually I had a friend, my best friend from 5th to 12th grade. The only reason that I know all the big words that I use is because he was the smartest kid in my school. He got a 36 on the
Oh,
ACT. He had like hundreds in every class. He was crazy smart, but he was just always nice to me, and we just always hung out. We were best friends. Like, yeah, he works on like really high tech stuff right now, according to my understanding. But we would literally talk to each other in Reliant K quotes, because they just have so many songs that you can almost hold a 15-minute conversation using nothing but song quotes from
beautiful,
them.
beautiful.
um, but yeah, so there's that. I read a lot from this author named Ted Decker. I don't know if I would enjoy his books the same going back to them now, because my taste has kind of evolved since then. I remember really loving his books though, and maybe he is a great author. I don't know. I haven't picked up one of his books in maybe 7 years. There was a solid 5 year period where I didn't read anything, because I was just always busy and I didn't really have time to pick up a book. I tried a few times. I tried reading A Brave New World. I thought it was amazing, and then I just didn't have time to read it, and that's probably the horrifying shame that I didn't get through that book because I love dystopian
Yeah.
sci-fi. Right now, I'm reading one of my friend's books, the first physical book that I've read in probably 7 years. It's called Heresy, by C.A. Campbell. Just shameless plug for my
Hey,
friend there.
do it.
And then I bought one of my other friend's audiobooks, What Death Taught Terrence by, uh, why am I blanking on his name? His name's Derek. I only call him Derek.
Oh my goodness.
Derek McFadden. Derek McFadden.
Okay.
That's right. He has the Irish last name or whatever. And then I also listen to, I've just been kind of listening to audiobooks, honestly. I listened to Black Prism by Brent Weeks. I'm trying to go through the Lightbringer series as well. Uh, so audiobooks have kind of become the only way that I read these days because I can listen to them at work because I just do a lot of stuff on the
Right.
computer. And a lot of it's very repetitive, so I can pay attention to the book while I'm doing these repetitive tasks and hopefully not getting anything wrong in my paperwork.
Right. Right. Um, yeah, I tend to do that too while I'm at work. Is just going through and help desk stuff is oh, I forgot my password. Oh, I need to get into my email. Oh, I can't do this, and it's just like, all right, fine, and it's all the same. It's repetitive, so I tend to throw on an audiobook or a podcast or something like that and listen to that
Yeah.
while I work. Um, have you worked with anyone else, like collaborating on anything before, or you kind of did a lot on your own?
So the first instance of me ever collaborating with somebody was on this very cringy horror story that I wrote with somebody on org. There was such a community there a long time ago. It was crazy. We had something called the DDO. We called it DDO, but we had something called the DDO Olympics, where there were different types of debates. Like there was political debates, economic debates, different types of things, and then there was a story writing debate where someone would start a story and then you would finish. You do the next part of the story, and then you just keep going down until you got to the end. Then people would kind of judge how well like each section was written and like judge on that point. Um, and so I won the first one. The second one didn't happen because my opponent no showed, and then we just kind of we were like a month after the beginning, and a lot of people had already finished up, and so we just didn't finish that. And then the anthology book that I'm in, Beneath the Twin Suns, that one was a collaborative experience. Basically, what it was is there's a author on Twitter named Renee Gendron. I actually don't know how to pronounce her last name, Gendron or something like that, who wanted like 40 or so authors to come together and write short stories for this world that she created to kind of build history and like a whole like kind of fluid story from like way in the past to way in the future. Being more of a sci-fi guy, I chose way in the
Right.
future. So I kind of collaborated with some of the people who wrote the very futuristic aspects. In the end, it really just involved me making sure that I wasn't stepping on anybody's toes because I wrote the first faster than light travel expedition from that planet, and so I was just like, "Hey, is anybody else doing like a faster than light travel sort of deal? Like, is it a thing or whatever?" And then I nobody else had done anything like that, so I was like, "Okay, I'm doing it. I get full creative control."
Nice.
But we kind of helped each other out with like at least with each other's timelines, like under making sure that we were kind of cohesive because she kind of left that up to us to um, write stories that worked with each other. And then she went through and edited them all. So that's the kind of story that I wrote. I just kind of did this short suspense story about a faster than light travel expedition.
Nice, nice. And so how was it working with everybody trying to get that timeline down? Like, was everybody pretty receptive to each other's ideas, or was there a lot of button heads?
Yeah, I don't think so. No, everybody was super nice, super respectful. We're all actually still sort of talking every once in a while. There's kind of a funny story behind it. It started during the quarantine. I was not at work because at the time I was working at a restaurant, so that couldn't be a thing. I was one of the first people that they brought back I was the server and support staff. I did everything but bartend at the beginning, and then I still did some bartending because sometimes there was just more business in the bar.
Right.
Uh, but so this thing started then, and I started trying to work out my story, and I ended up writing it after I went back, and I was spending all this energy on beats server, which is something that really killed my writing because it just left me drained every day, and I just wanted to play video games and do nothing
Yep. Yep.
because I was so drained from
Been
it.
there. That was when I
Yeah,
worked at the mechanic shop. We lived in so when we first moved here, we lived in a travel trailer, and we had no electricity and barely any running water. And we were on her
yikes.
brother's property, and I was working for her dad at the mechanic shop in the middle of Texas in the summer. So I was constantly exhausted. I was gone from 6 in the morning till 7, 8 o'clock at night, and I literally, I think I said this last week. I lost track of my writing so bad that I had thought I had completely finished the first issue of my comic book. And when I went to go send it to somebody, I was like, hang on, this is only the first half. Let me go find the second half. And I started digging, and I was like, oh, fuck. I only have the first half. I don't do the second half yet.
So we can compare that to my blunder. The funny part about the story is I did get my story sent in. I got the edits on it. I pushed to make the edits and make sure that it was better. I hit exactly 1,500 words, which is what she wanted for each story. And then she was like, okay, sweet. I'm going to get everything wrapped up, cleaned up. We got the cover. We're going to, I'm going to work on getting this published. And I was like, awesome. And then I took over. We had a speakeasy. I worked in a hotel restaurant, not like a nice hotel restaurant. And we had this speakeasy in the basement. And the other guy who came back at first he originally was the manager in that speakeasy. So they opened that back up, and he went down to manage that bar, and we were getting into fall. And so I asked the food and beverage director if I could make the fall menu. So I ended up like absorbing all this information about cocktails. It became really fun because I love cooking, and I found out that making cocktails is just cooking with liquid, um, and like putting together all these flavors. And I had so much fun with it. And then like November hit, and I was like, I wonder if that book ever got published. And I went and looked it up, and it got published in like October. And I was like, I completely slept on my own book. Like, how did I let that happen?
Damn.
And so so then I told my parents, and I was like, yeah, don't look at the day that it was published because it definitely wasn't the day that I told you about it.
It may have been out for a month or two, but it's fine. It's all
Yeah,
right.
it was out for a little while. It was like end of September, beginning of October, or something like that. And I just hadn't been paying attention because I'd been putting all of my energy into the restaurant. Because even then, when we weren't open in the mornings, the food and beverage director was not working at
Yeah.
night. So I was the guy at night, and I was managing everything and making the bar menu and all that, and just using all my energy. And I didn't like I had written 3 quarters of Sky City up until that point because I wrote that during the quarantine. And then I didn't end up finishing that until November because that's when I started writing it again. And so yeah, I completely forgot about the book. And then I looked it up and found out that it was a thing. And I was like so hyped, and then I was so disappointed in myself.
Happens, man. It fucking happens, dude.
Yeah.
Life gets in the way of a lot of shit, and it sucks. I wish that writers could, you know, get their break and just write. But I feel bad because I know everybody goes through it. You lose time and you lose motivation, and then you come back and you're like, oh, I'm so far along, and you read and you're like, I'm not that far along. Or you go back and read it and you're like, Jesus, this is a whole lot worse than I thought it was.
Yeah.
So what kind of pitfalls or challenges have you encountered while you write or in your writing experience?
I think finding my voice has been probably the biggest one, identifying how I sound as an author. A lot of how I wrote, in high school, there was a year and a half where I read exclusively Ted Dekker, who has a very specific writing style that works for him. And it didn't translate well to my work. Um, and so figuring out like like when I write a book, what does that sound like? Um, and then I listened to Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, and I'm like, this is like Neil Gaiman's writing style is completely different, like to anything that I'm used to. He's like this weird, cheeky, like third person omniscient author
Yep.
that I love. Uh, and it and then I was like, there's this whole space in between where there's like this like very formulaic and correct, and then there's this like, kind of out there like, and so figuring out what my writing voice sounds like was really difficult. And I think what I ended up doing in the end is I'm just somebody who's always like, I learned by copying things my whole life, which I guess is not an uncommon way to learn things. You know, covering songs, things like that, and copying, writing fan fiction of Doctor Who, which was fun.
Nice.
um, so I just kind of was like, well, I guess my characters are all different people. So when I narrate from their perspective, I guess they don't have to sound like me. They just have to sound like a real
Right.
person. Uh, and so it became more like trying to get to know these characters in my head, like I'm talking to them, and kind of expressing them that way and being able to write them out as if they are the ones writing the chapter. Uh, yeah. So, and I got a lot of practice in this too. There's the last story from DDO that I'm going to tell. But I made a few troll accounts on there
The
because this was back when I was like 15 and I thought that trolling was cool.
Edge Lord
But
days.
one of them, like, yeah, but one of them, like, just when I was making the account, I selected female instead of male. And that got me a lot of attention, like, just very believable amounts of attention, but it was a lot.
You
Um,
catfished a whole
and so,
group.
well, what I did was I told them all that I had a boyfriend, and so I'm like, I'm not interested in any of you guys. I'm just here to, do joke space mostly. um, but I played this character for like 4 or 5 years, and there was a few times where I was like, okay, it's not really funny anymore. The jig is up. I'm just gonna tell them. And then I was like, this almost feels like killing a
Yeah.
person because I've spent so much time trying to identify how this person who is not me interacts with other people. Someone who's not the same gender, they have a completely different experience in life to me. And I'm like joking around trying, and then it became like this weird learning experience for writing a character that's not me. And I just kind of dove headfirst into it, and I became this person on this specific website for years. And then my wife thought it was the funniest thing, and so she agreed to do a video where she just repeated stuff that I told her to say. And
Oh
so
fuck.
everybody, it like solidified in everybody's mind that
Oh.
this was the real, like up until then they were like, okay, she never shows her face on like the Google Hangouts or does the voice chat or anything like that. This is probably a guy. And then she did that for me, and they're like, nope, this is a girl. I mean, I see her and I hear her.
That is a
So
hell of a
it
character study.
solidified it. Yeah. And so, but it really, like, the point of it was just that it was really fun, and I enjoyed be like writing from the perspective of this other person. And I finally left debate.org because it just kind of turned into a place that you don't want to be. And the website had a bunch of issues because I'm pretty sure that the company that developed it went
Mhm.
bankrupt because they had an open bar in their development
Oh
room.
shit.
Yeah, like that was just one of their, they didn't, they wasn't even advertising for other jobs. It was just like on their website. They were like, oh yeah, we drink while we're at work too, like all the time. So hire us to build your website. It's like the website.
Hey, it's okay. I'll build your website for you. Yep, yep, yep. Yep. Oh my god.
Yeah, so it was just fun. And like when I finally left, I kind of made this piece where I'm like, okay, Jonelle is not a real person. Like there was a long period where writing from her perspective sort of made her feel like a real person because it was this character that I got very into. But I think that that was kind of a good I want to say I want to frame that as like a good exercise. I may not frame it as specifically as like a healthy exercise, um, but it was something that worked for me in exploring the perspective of somebody who's not me.
Right. I do that too when I write my characters, and so what I tend to do, and I know it sounds kind of weird and everything, but with whole meditation thing, I kind of learned to do this, and I tend to donate a bit of energy of myself to these characters, and I kind of, it's weird. It's like you let that energy flow through you when you write, so you kind of let the character take over you as you write, and it helps get into that zone and let them make the decisions, so you know where they would want it to go. And you treat them like an actual human. You treat them like a living person, and you go, okay, here's your situation, go figure it out, and you write down what you think, and what comes out.
I part of the way that I do that is with the time that I actually write is nearly. I go to bed around 9 o'clock and I wake up about 4 a.m. I have to be at work at 7:30, um, and I will write for an hour to an hour and a half, until I have to take my dogs out. But I wake up a very clean slate because I'm rested and I get my coffee. I listen to music. I don't have any baggage from the day yet.
Right.
Uh, I don't have any tiredness from things that have happened at work. Uh, my wife doesn't have to fight for my attention with my books because she's not awake. She definitely does not wake up at 4 a.m.
Right.
She wakes up as close as she can to go into work as she needs to in order to help me get everything ready. Um, but yeah, so I get this kind of quiet time where I'm just like, I'm awake. I haven't really thought much yet, and I get to just kind of hop into these books and get to writing. And that's what works for me, and that's what's helped me finish my first book. Well, my first book that I'm actually going to attempt to publish. And that's what helps me write this other web series that I'm writing right now.
Right. It's awesome. So I know you have a job and everything, and so and well, I mean, I guess that answered my question. How do you balance your personal and work life with your writing schedule? And I
Yeah.
mean, that answered my question right there. So I guess the next question would be, what would be your end goal in writing? Like, do you want to like officially like make money off of it and live off of it? Or are you just doing it for fun? Like, what's your finish line?
Yeah, I want to make enough money that it makes sense for me to write all the time. Um, my wife and I have talked about it a little bit. She's the kind of person that actually really enjoys working. She gets kind of bored if she doesn't have a job. Uh, and so she enjoys working and being at her job. So if I make enough money to compensate for the amount of income that I make, at least, then
Right.
it makes sense for me to stay at home and be a writer. Um, and then at that point, I would have enough money or enough time to invest time into growing that and uh, getting a little bit more advertising and stuff like that. My goal, kind of with my books right now, is I'm writing a web series for people to um, be able to kind of sample my writing, get a good idea of how it is that I write. Um, and it's kind of something it's higher concept. It's also kind of geared towards general audiences, despite the weird like Lovecraftian monster that I introduce in it.
Nice.
um,
Nice.
uh, so I just kind of am doing that so that I can kind of get my name out there. I'm going to try to traditionally publish my middle grade novels. One reason is there's a lot less people attempting to write middle grade
Right.
novels. It's a much smaller market than something like YA or adult. If you go try to find an agent in YA, there's going to be 3,000 other people querying the same person that you're trying to
Yep.
query. There's not a significant amount of middle grade authors, but a lot of them have kind of established themselves. And there's a much smaller amount of people trying to get into that. And so, aside from my personal views on wanting to write books for kids, there's also kind of this benefit that should hopefully be able to find an agent a little bit easier,
Right.
and find publishing opportunities a little bit easier. And my goal is to take money that I make from that, and whatever I make, funnel that into self-publishing in other areas. So basically, I'm going to use my writing to fund my writing,
Nice.
and hopefully that investment will turn into profit eventually.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome, man. And I think that's kind of where we all want to be, is to be able to kind of have that positive feedback loop of money from writing. You know, the more you put out, the more you get back in, kind of thing. Um,
Yeah, eventually, yeah.
so do you have any advice for any aspiring writers?
I've tried to sprinkle it throughout. I find a lot of value in helping younger writers because I wish that I had that help when I was
Right.
younger. But we live with what we get. Um, I think that some of the most important things is, Charlie said, advice earlier, like don't take advice from someone who's not in a position where you want to be. I extend that to don't take advice from somebody who doesn't see what you're trying to do, uh, because your unique vision is something that is unique. It's not something that somebody else can do. There are people who have similar visions, and they're going to be better people to help out with what it is that you're trying to do. So finding, obviously, I recommend getting out of an echo chamber in terms of other places, but when you get into a very specific type of writing, it's better to be around people who are a little bit more similarly minded, because they're the people that are going to be able to help you grow.
Right.
Other people are going to have lots of great advice. Just always filter it through the lens of you understanding that your vision is important, and that uniqueness is something beautiful. Um, yeah, that's the biggest thing, uh, honestly. I think that if I'd known that, I would have written some braver books. The reason that I'm writing Stargazer is because of that, not really because somebody else told me that stuffing all of these different ideas in is a good idea, but because I decided that that's something that I think that I can do efficiently. Uh, and after like 4 drafts of the intro, my writer friends now agree with me on that. But if I'd just thrown that at the wall and asked them to, tell me what they think, they probably would have said something like, "You're doing a lot," and you could just cut a few of those things, and it would be better. So instead of cutting things, I just found more efficient ways to do
Right.
it, uh, and I think that that's really important as well. Is just being able to achieve your vision, accept advice from some people, filter advice, and understand that everybody just has their own unique perspective that they're trying to throw out. And also, if somebody asserts that they're more qualified as a writer, don't listen to them ever, because nobody is qualified to be a writer.
100%.
Like, you can get a creative writing degree, but that still doesn't necessarily qualify you to be a writer. It just means that you have a different perspective, and probably a more educated perspective, but there's a lot of really great authors who had no qualifications whatsoever. They just had stories to tell, and they told them,
Yep.
and it was beautiful. So
You hear that, Charlie? A creative writing degree doesn't mean you're a writer. I gotta bust it.
no, writing means you're a
I gotta
writer.
bust his
That's
balls
what it
about it.
is.
That's it. He's got a creative writing degree, and I give him shit about it all the time. Um.
No, yeah, my friend has a creative writing degree. She's a fantastic
Oh yeah,
author.
yeah. He's
I've
great.
read some of her work, and it's incredible. But yeah, I mean, writing makes you a
Yeah.
writer.
Right. Right.
Creative writing degrees can probably help you learn some useful skills that you can apply to your writing. Um, but that you don't need it in order to be a great
One
author.
hundred percent.
So
100%.
yeah,
Um. So I think that about wraps it up. I'll go ahead and I'll put links down to the Amazon page for Under the Twin Suns. So everybody can go there and look at that. I'll put a link to your web series as well, so everybody can go ahead and take a look at that, give you some love, read up on it, and all of that. And so yeah, you know, it was a good show. I really appreciate you coming on here, man. A lot of good stuff. Y'all go ahead, subscribe, like, comment, all that good noise. We will see y'all next week, and we'll catch y'all later.
Thanks for having
No
me
problem,
on.
man.
Thanks.